Okay, welcome to a podcast by the Thriller Rookie Book Club. I'm Sabrina, and your other host today is Helen.
Hello.
Here are some a question for you guys to think about as we go through this podcast. The question is that what would you do to become a great writer? And then there's also a word that kind of goes with our theme, which is truth.
Yeah, so the reason I actually put that there is because when it comes to Verity, it actually the name itself actually means truth, which I think is very interesting. That goes along great with our book. And another thing, in addition, especially because of the themes in the novel, just a trigger warning, there are signs of abuse and violence. Just to put that out there for anyone listening. Okay, and then let's get into the summary. So, Verity, although the title may confuse, is actually about a character named Lowen. So, Lowen Ashley is actually a writer, a struggling writer, and they love writing horror, suspense, the psychological thriller kind of novels. And they're kind of struggling at the moment financially. And Lowen finally gets reached out by their publisher, letting them know, they have a job opportunity. But what makes it really ominous is what happens. So Lowen, is on their way to go to this meeting with the publisher, and someone dies right before her, which is really interesting. It's a psychological thriller, and you have the themes of death and whatnot. So I think it's just really setting it up with a really dark theme. We're already going to have to expect plot twists out there, but um, essentially when this happens, Lowen actually meets up with an individual who ends up being a person who kind of becomes really close to her throughout the novel, and their name is Jeremy. And Jeremy becomes a love interest for Lowen. And as we can see throughout the novel, they kind of start developing a relationship. But essentially, the job that Lowen was going and accepted was to work for Verity. And Verity in this novel is actually quite known to be a really great writer for horror and, those kind of scary novels. And, at first, Jeremy tells her, my wife loved your novels. So that's the reason she was hired. And, obviously she was a little scared of taking the job because she's not much of a public person. And in addition to that, she hasn't really been perceived really well by her other readers. And she was afraid of, how they would react. But in the end, she ended up taking the job. And well, that's kind of where the plot twist come in. So, Sabrina, what did you think about the book?
I thought it was amazing. I feel like a lot of her books, I would not say maybe this one would be the first one you'd want to read. I heard that her other books are very like romantic based. But it was definitely a good read. It's easy to sink into. And I feel like I couldn't put down the book. Like when we were doing our book club, it was really hard to stick with, oh, this is what chapter we're gonna read. Okay, like we're done. But I feel like you and I both, we, like I said, really enjoyed it. Um, the reason is because mostly with like horror and suspense books, I feel like you kind of know what's gonna happen. Like you're able to predict, like, oh, okay, well, this is obviously the killer. This is obviously like the bad person in the book. But however, like in Verity, that didn't really happen, or like it did happen, but that's why it was so great because in the end, like we were both kind of wrong. Let's see. Yeah, and I feel this way because, for example, like Lowen would be like really suspicious, and then we kind of thought like she was the evil one, and then all of a sudden it turned to like Jeremy, who ended up being like kind of the crazy person or matched Verity's craziness. Um, but yeah, I feel like the entire time we were kind of wrong about who was actually, the evil one in a way. And I feel like we would definitely recommend this to a lot of the people, like our friends. However, like Helen mentioned, there definitely should be a trigger warning. There's a lot of things in here that like really shocked me. But yeah, now I guess we go to the themes or the book passages.
Yes, so there was a passage that you found that I think really illustrated that darkness that comes from Verity.
Yeah,
And I think it, especially since, you know, it's a dark kind of a novel, especially with the things that Verity tries to do. And it's kind of one of the things that makes you question, you know, what kind of person Verity is. Um,
yeah,
so would you like me to read it or would you like to read it?
yeah. I can definitely read it. So it's one of Verity's chapters in here in her manuscript, and the passage begins. But then the night we got engaged, it became the night we conceived. And here is where it gets real, the guts of my autobiography. This is the point when other authors would paint themselves in a better light rather than throw themselves into an x ray machine. But there is no light where we're going. This is your final warning, darkness ahead. I just, that definitely made me think, like, wow, Verity is going to plan something, like something bad's going to happen, you know? So,
Definitely. Yeah. Um, and then another thing is just spoiler alert when, you know, as we see Lowen kind of finds that letter and we realize, well, apparently the manuscript, you know,
mhm,
was her just practicing to be a better writer, which is, you know, the question, you know, what would you do to become a great writer?
yeah,
And, and it's just something that Lowen taking the job is just something that Lowen had to do to, in order to financially be able to do that.
right.
And there's something this was before we even find the letter, which is why I actually started thinking about it again. And I believe Lowen and Jeremy are talking about Verity. And they're talking about when Chaston passed away. And just to for those who haven't read the novel, Chaston is one of the children they had. There's Harper and Chaston.
Mhm.
They were twins. In the manuscript, Verity made it seem like she didn't want the children, which it's like the things Verity did in order to make Jeremy happy. It just makes you question, like, why did you put yourself in those positions, you know?
Right.
And so Chaston unfortunately passes away from, you know, an allergic reaction, and Harper passed away from drowning. But basically, Jeremy says he tried to contact their parents to let them know, you know, the kids passed away. Um, can't recall if it was, I want to say yes, it was Chaston. After Chaston passed away, and what Verity's father says just really rattles you when he says,
Mhm.
um, so when I told him what had happened to the girls and to Verity, he grew quiet, then said, God punishes the wicked, Jeremy. I hung up on him, haven't heard from them since. And the reason I thought this was really interesting, as I said, you know, the letter and how that comes into place in the end, it made me question that. I know from earlier in the novel as well that Jeremy said Verity didn't have a good relationship with her parents because, you know, they didn't like how she wrote the psychological thriller and horror novels because they thought it was very demonic. So I guess we're kind of getting the idea that they were probably really religious. But the other thing is, you know, after we discover the letter, it makes me question maybe what happened in the manuscript could have been true, and maybe she wanted to write about it.
Yeah.
Maybe as a sometimes, you know, I can't even figure that out yet, but then at the same time you're trying to figure out maybe the manuscript isn't real. So I guess in the end that's kind of what you end up asking yourself, do you know?
Mhm.
Because of how he says, you know, God punishes the wicked, you know, was the manuscript something that was real, or maybe something that Verity made up to become a great writer? But that was one of the things. And then I guess since we're gonna be talking, another one that I found, which also makes us question Lowen's sanity, was when this is finally where Lowen and Jeremy kind of start getting closer in their relationship. You know, they're having sexual relationship, and and as we know, Lowen's on medication,
Mhm.
Xanax, which means that kind of you're not in a place where you can make good decisions. But very Lowen, sorry, Lowen, after having a relationship, sexual intercourse with Jeremy, she decides to put a pillow under her hips, and just makes you think, is Lowen in the right place of
Yeah.
mind to even be doing this? But that leads me to the themes that we found. So one of the ones that primarily comes out is good versus evil. And the reason I say this is because, well, as we see, the things that Verity does is very questionable, and they're obviously evil. But we also have Lowen who comes in, who tries to help, but she herself is struggling with her own, as I say, demons,
Mhm.
sleepwalking, and the relationship she had with her mother and how that impacted her. And just also because of the way we perceive Jeremy, we assume, he ends up being a good guy, but in reality, he ends up putting his life on the line by killing Verity.
Mhm.
So it's really this, the demons fighting here are good versus evil, because we see people who are trying to be good, but they end up doing evil things.
Right.
Um, and then there's also fate and choice. We see some of the decisions that Lowen makes, makes you question, is this something that was just meant to happen to her, or was it by decision that this is what she wanted, especially in the end when she decided to stay with Jeremy even after everything. um, and there's also kind of this sense of heartfelt, care, and especially when it comes to the letter, you start thinking, was this something that uh, Verity is, actually heartfelt about writing the manuscript and regrets it, because she does mention crying, or is it just something she's just trying to cover up? And as well as family, the family relationships, especially when we're talking about Crew, who's the last child left behind, and Verity and Jeremy, because they're married together, and the love they have as well, not just the relationship that Verity had with Jeremy, but also the relationship that is new, which is Lowen and Jeremy.
Mhm.
But those are just some of the themes. Um,
Yeah. I definitely feel like those are good themes. Especially like the family. Like we both know that this, like walking into this book, I feel like the family didn't already seem a little normal. And it's just not like at the end, it's just not the type of family that we thought it was. So I think that's a really good thing to point out.
yeah, exactly. It's like I said, it's about that truth. Like you're trying to figure out is something that's true or not. Are they telling the truth or not?
Hmm.
Especially with how we perceive all the characters.
Yeah.
But how did you feel about Verity? Because she was a very like you're trying to figure out, is this a reliable character, is a manuscript? How did you feel about Verity?
I think I honestly, like, as horrible as I thought she was, like, reading the story and like her manuscripts like really made my stomach turn. I honestly just feel kind of bad for her like at the end of all of it. Um I don't know, like I almost like really don't like Lowen and Jeremy now. Like at the beginning I was like, wow, Verity is such like a horrible person, and but then like at the end I'm like, wow, no, like Lowen and Jeremy like are the ones who don't have like their minds like right. So yeah, I feel like at the end I really like think Verity deserved better in a way.
Yeah. Do you think she wrote that manuscript like that it was based on real experiences, or do you think it was fake?
Mm, you know what? That's something I don't know. Like, I want to say that it was definitely like a reading strategy, but why did it get so dark? And why did it seem so real type thing? Um,
Yeah, that's definitely something that you kind of have to ask yourself, especially when we know that Lowen might not be a reliable character. What about, how'd you feel about Lowen? Because I had mixed feelings about her. Like, I trusted her in the beginning, but then,
Me too.
seeing how she started developing, how'd you feel about Lowen?
Yeah. Lowen, I don't like her. I really like at the beginning, like I said, I thought she was, this normal person just going to try to get her like book published, I believe. But yeah, at the end, I don't know. I feel like she's definitely like the bad one. Definitely the bad one.
Yeah.
And then I feel like her and Jeremy, like another spoiler alert, but like when they were trying to when Jeremy had his hands on Verity's neck, I believe, Lowen, I thought she was actually gonna stop him from like choking Verity. But then I think she said stop, and then she proceeds to like tell him, no, you need to make it seem like it was an accident type thing. And I was like, no, like these people are both like the bad ones here now.
Yes, that is very true. Um, in that moment, my head just started spinning. Like, what the? I did
Yeah,
not know you were capable of that. Like you said,
yeah,
it's just full of all these plot twists. Like, it definitely is a really good novel. Like, to be quite
yeah,
honest, my expectations of it were like, oh, I found it on Amazon. It's probably not going to be that great, but it ended up being really good.
yeah. And that like kind of brings me back to the beginning when I said like it just wasn't like a predictable book. Like I thought it was gonna be. Like I remember you and I talking about like, oh wow, like I can't believe Verity's gonna do this. Like she's definitely awake. Um, but no, it was definitely not like it didn't end how we thought it was gonna end, and like who we thought was evil ended up not being evil.
Yeah.
So
I think that's also kind of when I was trying to figure out, were they bad people or not, I started asking myself, the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. And just in case those are listening don't know the difference, a psychopath lacks guilt or empathy. So
right.
they don't feel pity. But a sociopath can, they can have a little guilt, after maybe doing something that's not right. So that's kind of also when I was trying to figure out, is um, at first I was like, is Verity a
Mhm.
psychopath? We knew she loved Jeremy, but it was also kind of questionable in a way. But then,
Yeah,
um, the one I thought, maybe the one who's actually like a psychopath, is Sloan because she's not making the right decisions.
yeah.
But I saw her more as a sociopath because she did end up, she still had pity for the things happening around her. But I think in the end, what really shocked me was knowing, well, maybe the psychopath here is Jeremy because he killed her. And I'm sure, as we learned in the letter, he wanted to do it again earlier, but, it was a failed attempt.
Right.
But
I know. I feel very bad for Crew, like their Jeremy's son.
mhm.
Like it's just like so interesting that he had to like go through all of that. And I feel like a lot of the time when kids are like young, like the adults don't really think they know what's going on, but I'm pretty sure like he's gonna get a sense or he already has a sense of like what's going on in his family.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's kind of sad to think about that he's in that like crazy household.
Yeah, talk about trauma because I definitely think that's what he's gonna end up with, if they were real characters. But
Yeah, and they do talk about taking him to therapy or not, I believe.
mhm.
And at the end of the book, I want to say that they end up actually putting him in therapy, or he's gonna start going.
Yeah, I think that actually points us to another theme that maybe we just kind of unconsciously found, which is trauma. We
Yeah,
see that Lowen's kind of insecure because of her trauma of having sleepwalking, and then Verity and Jeremy both went through the death of their children, and that's probably going to leave Crew with the survivor's guilt, being the only child left.
right. Yeah.
But
That also made me think about how I believe you mentioned this in one of our book club, but like how death kind of follows Lowen in a way.
mhm,
How like at the beginning of the book, she's on her way to get published, and then like she watches someone get like squished under like a semi truck, and blood splashes all over her, and then like it begins with death and then it also ends with death. Um, so yeah, that was just a random thought, but you made me think about what you said. So
yeah, that's very true. Especially even before that individual was killed, we see that her mom died.
yeah, hmm,
And she talks about not having a good relationship with her, but she kind of still mourned her in a way. So
yeah.
that was interesting. All right. Any last thoughts?
I don't know. I think we can move on to the questions. There's
Yeah,
like a lot of unanswerable questions.
definitely. Especially when reading this novel.
Yeah.
Did you have any kind of questions that you felt were like unanswerable?
Um, I do, and it takes place. So I believe, I want to say, like, correct me if I'm wrong. Did Jeremy find out about the transcript before Lowen? Like, he already knew that, I believe.
Yes, yeah. He found it before, and that's kind of so the car crash that happens in the novel
Yeah.
is
Uh,
him that actually does it to Verity. So yeah, because he found it and he got really upset and he wanted to hurt her.
yeah, it kind of just makes me like wonder if like the way he kind of reacted when Lowen said like, oh, like this is Verity's manuscript, and he was just like, where did you find this type thing? And the fact that he like locked himself in the room and like read it for a long time, like if he already knew about it, I just would expect his reaction to be a little bit more different. And like I feel like if he was actually like a normal human being, he would have been like, to be honest, I kind of knew about like the manuscript already,
Yeah.
instead of like, trying to play it off like he didn't know
Hmm.
in a way. Um,
Especially since, like you stated earlier, um, how you said that he was the one that read Lowen's books, and he ended
yeah,
up being the one making the decision for Lowen to write the book, even though he probably, since like he said in the novel, he never read any of Verity's novels. So it's like, what kind, what kind of place do you think you have in taking and making that decision as well?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I guess that's like one of the questions. Why did Jeremy react the way he did when Lowen confronted him about the manuscript if he already knew? And like, why did Jeremy feel like he had like the right to choose Verity's next like author of her own novels? Or like, why did he choose Lowen to continue the novels when he's not even a writer himself?
Yeah,
Um, yeah, those are some really good questions I'd love to know.
yeah. And then I guess another one I was thinking, victim wise, is Verity the victim, because we see they kill her. But it also makes me ask, like, but who really is the victim in this novel? Because I feel bad for Lowen, because I think in a way, maybe she shouldn't have stayed with Jeremy, knowing the things he's done. But, that's just the decision she made. So that kind of, and then that's kind of the question I asked myself, who is the victim? Is Verity the victim, or Crew too, especially being the child?
Mhm. Yeah, this also just came to my mind. It might be like I might be going a little bit like too far, but I'm just like now thinking, like, what if Jeremy set like all of this up? Like, you know how Lowen walked in and Verity was like kind of like putting something in the ground? Like it
Hmm.
just makes me wonder, like, what if Jeremy actually like, was trying to frame Verity, like he was the crazy one. He wrote the manuscript, he put that letter, Verity was like trying to find the letter. Um, I don't know. It just kind of makes me think like Jeremy, what if he's like the really big evil one?
Yeah, that's very true. I think in the end we kind of realize Verity, as the manuscript might portray her, is not really the victim. I mean, the villain, which is
Mhm.
another word that I feel like we repeated a lot in our discussions.
Yeah,
Lowen and Verity being the villains, but then in the end we kind of realized that I think the real villain was really Jeremy.
yeah, definitely.
So I think that's where we're gonna close off for today. Um, so that was Verity by Colleen Hoover. And the image I chose for here is actually dandelions because they actually symbolize truth, which is something we've been trying to figure out during the whole novel of Verity. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.